Good evening, Simon Jacobson here to speak about a very powerful topic. The title being, Are You a Traveler? Are you a traveler? Spiritual frequent flyers. And I want to begin by saying that this class is dedicated in honor and in memory of Sidel Tova, whose birthday is today, July 27th, dedicated by her loving children, Ari, Dov, and Goldie, who I wish all the best today on this special day as they visit the grave of their mother. May her soul be connected to all the teachings of the Torah that we will be doing this evening, and the merit of all of us learning and being inspired together. May her soul only be elevated, and in turn give strength to her children and to all of us to travel through our journey, because after all, a soul's journey that begins from the moment we're born actually begins even earlier than that, but continues on even after 120 years when a soul travels to another plane. It's all one long journey. So it's quite appropriate that we'd be talking about traveling, about soul, about journeys. And of course it's all connected to this week's Torah portion, which is the conclusion of Book 4 of the 5 books of the Torah. Book 4, the book of Numbers, or the book of Bamidbar, concludes with a chapter called Maseh, which literally means journeys. And of course it refers to the total and the sum total conclusion of the 42 journeys that the Jewish people took through the wilderness after they left Egypt on their way to the Promised Land. I've written about these 42 journeys, as the Baal Shem Tov says that each of these journeys we go through in our entire lifetime, and some places it actually says every day we go through 42 such journeys. But in our general lifetime we go through these 42 journeys, and I've written in a series of articles and exercises how we can discover these 42 steps in our own lives. So that will not be the discussion here, and you can find it online at our website, meaningfullife.com, or email us, and we'll be happy to send that link to you. But what we will be discussing is the inner meaning and the deeper meaning behind all these journeys. The interesting thing is that the Torah is one big story about journeys. From the beginning all the way to the conclusion of the 5 books of Chumash, of the Bible, of the Torah, it's all about journeys. Not just these 42 journeys, but just to spell it out, you see immediately Adam and Eve are placed into the Garden of Eden, and they begin their first journey by being expelled from that garden after they ate from the tree of knowledge. Then you have the journey and the transmigration of generations. You have the journey of Noah on the ark, surviving the flood. You have, of course, Lech Lecha, the great journey of the first Jew, of the first pioneer, Abraham. Lech Lecha, leave your homeland, southeast of modern Iraq, and go toward the Promised Land, Israel. You have the journeys of Isaac, of Jacob, the 70 souls at the end of the book of Genesis that journey down from Israel because of the great famine to Egypt, and begins a new leg of the story of the history of the Jewish people enslaved in Egypt. And then, even once they're free 210 years later, another journey. Following the Exodus begins the great journey that we are now addressing. And interestingly, it actually occupies almost four-fifths of the entire Torah. It discusses these 42 journeys. Because remember, once the book of Genesis covers the story from Adam all the way through the death of Jacob and his sons, the book of Exodus begins the story of the exile in Egypt, which then leads into the Exodus in the 3rd chapter of Exodus, of Shmos, in Boy, when the Jews leave Egypt, and that begins a journey, 42 steps, of which will conclude all the way to the end of the Torah. So basically, most of the book of Exodus, the book of Leviticus, Vayikra, the book of Bamidbar, Numbers, and the book of Deuteronomy, Dvarim, are all about these 42 journeys. In this week's chapter, we come to the conclusion of these 42 steps. The Jews have now arrived their 42nd station at the east bank of the Jordan River, poised to cross over into the Promised Land. The next book that we will begin next week of Dvarim, the week before Tisha B'Av, is a review. Moses reviews in the last days of his life, from Rosh Chodesh Shvat to Zayin Adar, to the 7th of Adar, those 36, 37 days, he reviews all that transpired, including these 42 journeys again, and then the Torah concludes, which we conclude on Simchas Torah, with Moses' death, and the last sentences about him going up on the mountain, and the Jews still, at the end of the book, did not enter the promised land. So, if you talk about journey, the Torah is filled, fraught with one long journey, many mini journeys, journeys within journeys, and journeys within journeys within journeys. Which tells us, of course, the obvious lesson that Torah is a blueprint for life, as I've always discussed here. The obvious lesson that life is a journey. Never think of life in any static fashion, with constant movement, constant mobility, constant traveling from one place to the next. But, and here's the big but, what does that exactly mean? If most people are asked the question, are you a traveler? Do you grow? Do you move? Are you mobile? Especially today, the answer, without missing a beat, is absolutely yes. With air travel today, people have never flown as much as they fly today. So there you go, travel on that level. There are other vehicles we use to travel, especially now in the summer in this hemisphere. You have boats, you have, besides planes, we have jet skis, we have motorboats, we have, of course, vehicles of all sorts and shapes and forms, automobiles, SUVs, and so on, motorcycles, unicycles, bicycles, tricycles, and every type of cycle. And then we have, of course, our legs, and we move about. In a more figurative and metaphorical sense, people will say they move about and they travel extensively based on the fact that we live in an internet age, in the super-supersonic age of communications. You can actually travel, or we call it surf, browse, through Google, through the internet, anywhere, everywhere, anytime. Any dream, any fantasy, any word you just type in, you're there. You can get information, you can see sites, you go to YouTube. So today we live in a world where people would say we're very mobile, we're constantly on the move, we're constantly going from one place to the next. Look how much is accessible at our fingertips. You can sit here and travel anywhere. We even can see with cameras into outer space millions of miles away. Unprecedented type of so-called movement or travel. But is that real travel? That's the question. Is that real movement? Is movement about how far, how many frequent flyers you can accumulate? What about movement that we call being moved by a beautiful song, by a stirring melody, by a beautiful flower, by nature? So you can really be talking up and traveling many, many miles, and traveling in many ways, and really be completely lethargic, stuck in one place, in your comfort zone, unable to budge out of fear or insecurity. Actually, living in our times is somewhat deceptive because it can convince us, delude us into thinking that we're big movers and shakers, when in fact, we're really stuck in one place. The real definition of movement is not just physical movement. Its movement means movement from within, and that's what we will be addressing. You take, for example, a little child, newborn child. Not newborn, but a few months later when they begin to crawl around. A child is alive. Look at the sparkle in the child's eyes. Constantly enchanted. Everything is exciting. Little things, trivial things. A child is always moving about. Its nature is mobility. Very much reflective of life itself. Life, look at life. What is life? Life is never static. Life consists of a constant breathing momentum and flow. Exhale, inhale. Life is a constant heartbeat and pulsation, a pulsating energy of contraction, expansion. Life is constant movement. And a child reflects that in the healthiest and most seamless fashion. You look at a child and you see, a newborn child, you see its heartbeat. You can see its chest heaving. You can see the lungs going up and down. Once we breathe in enough toxins, the movement begins to slow down. And interesting, as we age, movement begins to slow down. So a child, in a way, is a prototype, or I would say, not really the right archetype, a paradigm, a paragon of what real movement is about. Constantly looking around, exploring. I remember once sitting and doing a plan, a schedule with my brother. We were talking about creating a summer retreat, and he had brought his little son along. I believe I've told this story before. He brought his little son along to join us, and he has a little son, maybe 1 year old, 1.5 years old, and it was my office. It was full of paper, so you can imagine it's a mecca for a child. A child can play around and do whatever it does, and it can destroy my entire office, which I found quite amusing, and it was a good opportunity, a good excuse to clean up my office anyway. Just suddenly, I don't know whether it was unintentionally, I turned on the screen, the video screen in our office, the television, and the child suddenly froze. This active, excited child who was turning over and upside down my entire office suddenly froze in his tracks, sat down, and looked up at the screen, frozen, like completely hypnotized. It took a split second. And I saw the child watching this television, and it was actually quite chilling. Both me and my brother were disturbed because we suddenly saw a child so alive, suddenly so dead in a certain way. And after 30 seconds, 45 seconds, my brother says to me, shut it down, which I did, I shut it. And the child still remained looking at the screen for a few seconds more, just to make sure that life has stopped. And what we saw was, interestingly, as life emerged, as life appeared on the screen, the child ceased being alive in the sense of moving about, mobility, searching and exploring. The stimulation, the visual stimulation, created this type of hypnotic trance. And I thought to myself, this is a child 30 seconds, 45 seconds of exposure. What about most kids today? They say we watch 4, 5, 6 hours average a day of TV. Throw in the internet, throw in video games, throw in all the other visuals that are overstimulating and desensitizing us. So we see action going on, action movies, superheroes, and we live action through those people, while we ourselves can be couch potatoes, sitting in our little comfort zone on our couch, munching on whatever it is that we munch. And movement is all around us, and we feel lifted by that movement as if we ourselves are moving. This is major deception. So once upon a time when we didn't have technology, there was no escape. You couldn't put on a video camera, a video machine, or a movie or a film for a child to watch. The child had to find stimulation outside of any machines, man-made machines. Children played with each other. Children interacted with their parents. So I'm not suggesting a fire brimstone attitude to technology. It's just a great contrast to not deceive ourselves into thinking just because you can get on a cell phone right now and you can text someone 1,000,000 miles away, and that you can travel anywhere you want in the world and go on vacation spots in most beautiful exotic places, that you're really moving. Because by contrast, a child may be in his own little room, bedroom, living room, crawling around, not flying anywhere, not connected to any technology, and there may be more movement going on in that child's soul and spirit, growth, than in someone who may have millions and millions of miles under their belt. You look at a chassid sitting under a talit, praying. And what do you see? You see a person who may be for hours and hours, I've seen this, under a talit praying on a Shabbos. And they don't budge from the place. But that person's soul, that person's heart, is traveling millions of miles, spiritually, emotionally, intellectually. And when you think of it that way, it takes on a whole different understanding of what is really movement. You see someone gazing at a natural beauty. It can be for hours. They're not moving physically, but what is going on in their heart, their psyches? You see someone maybe sitting in a chair pondering mysteries of existence. So movement is a much deeper thing than just the illusion of physically being placed to one place to the next. And the question really is are many people who are moving about a lot, travel a lot, who feel mobile and have the opportunity to really be in different places, are they really changing? Is there true movement and growth? Or perhaps this restlessness is not the healthy restlessness of a soul searching for more, the search for transcendence. Perhaps it's a restless soul running in fear, insecurity, because it doesn't trust anyone or any place to hang its hat and can't stay anywhere stuck for too long. You know, children who run from fire burning building, and I mean that not just in a physical sense, but in a psychological sense, are always on the run. It may appear like a free spirit, but they're just running for safety, and they're afraid to stay in one place for too long. So movement today has a very dissonant type of element where we can deceive ourselves into thinking we're really moving when you're not moving anywhere. And you could have another person, by contrast, who's in one place physically and is moving in most profound possible ways. I'm not suggesting they're mutually exclusive. You could have both. But they can, ultimately, one can create a deception and a distortion that compromises the other. So in that sense, we have to look into this in a deeper way and really understand what movement is and how one moves. So this is laying out some of the lay of the land to just get a sense of what of the theme of the discussion of journeys about traveling, and hopefully we can come away with new tools, or maybe tools that were always there that we have not been able to access, and trying to fully appreciate of how we truly can move. So when we say the word movement, let's talk about the word movement. Movement is used in many ways. People move about. Movement is also used in music, a movement. We also use movement as in the context of being moved. You hear a story, you hear a song, you listen to a song, you recall a memory, you recollect a memory, and you're moved, you're touched. When we say we're moved, what does that mean, we're moved? You could be sitting at a lecture, hearing a brilliant speaker, and not be moved. Another person can captivate you, take you to places you could never have gone to on your own, make you cry, make you laugh. What does it mean to be moved? When we look at someone we love, when we're in the presence of people that we love us, there's a certain movement going on that is part of the natural rhythm, the natural pulsation, as I mentioned, of life. And the interesting thing is that this pulsation is facing a battle all the time, because the mechanical world, the material world, fights that mobility. So let's put this into context. The context is simply this. The soul is the epitome, the quintessential mover and shaker. The soul is a journeyer, a traveler, in the sense that it's constantly moving. It doesn't know what rest, it doesn't understand the concept of stopping. Even a stop, and everyone has to stop, is also part of forward movement. So the soul is compared to Ner Hashem Nishmat Adam. The soul is compared to the lamp of God, flame of God. It's compared to a flame. The closest approximation of what a soul looks like in physical universe is a flame. Ner Hashem. Look at a flame, observe a flame, and you see it's the only physical item, only physical entity that has the property of defying gravity. It's constantly flickering, constantly reaching upward. And were it not for the wick, were it not for some form of containment, it would expire. But when we look at a flame, the interesting thing is it alive? A flame, is a flame inanimate or animate? So the properties of the flame itself, you can say, hey, it's made out of oxygen, it's made out of other substances and elements and molecules that turn it into what fire is fire. But in essence, when you look at it, its properties are constantly moving. The same with the soul. So the soul may be made up of components, but its nature, its personality, is one of movement. So it knows no concept of stopping. That's why you have the expression tzaddikim. Ein lehem menucha lo ba'olam haza v'lo ba'olam haba. Sometimes it says Talmidei Chachamim. Tzaddikim, Talmidei Chachamim, do not have, scholars and righteous people do not have rest, menucha. They don't have respite, they don't rest, not in this world and not in the world to come. What does that mean? Tzaddikim are the closest thing to what a soul is supposed to be like on this earth. They have subjugated, tamed, channeled their own bodies to become vehicles for their soul. So a tzaddik is a natural mover like the soul is. But what does it mean not to have menucha? So to ask the question, rephrase it in a Talmudic sense, there's another Talmudic statement that says that Mashiach comes, the Messianic age, the 7th millennium is compared to the Shabbos, whereas the 6 millennia are compared to the 6 days of the week, work days. Shabbos is Yom Shekulei Shabbos Umanucha L'chai Elamim. The 7th millennia will be a millennia that is like a complete day, in this sense a complete millennia of rest, of menucha, l'chai elamim, forever and ever. The same word used, menucha. So how do we reconcile that? It says tzaddikim, talmidei chacham, don't have any menucha, same word, any peace or tranquility or not in this world, not in the world to come. And then we say in the world to come, which includes the Messianic age, they will be it will be a day of kulei menucha. How do you ein la menucha and kulei menucha are seemingly diametric opposites? One of the beautiful answers given to this is, I believe the Marsha says at the end of the Talmud, the tractate Talmud, where that second statement that the Yom Shekulei Shabbos u'Menucha l'Chai Elamim is stated, that tzaddikim will be at peace with not having peace. In other words, there are two types of restlessness. There are two types of lack of peace. One is a person who's, I mentioned, constant fear, or even not even constant fear, but ongoing fear, always running, afraid. Psychologically, anyone growing up in a very abusive or in a very dysfunctional or unstable environment and home is running. They had to run as a child, and they always run until they learn to build a safety net, to build a trusting place, trusting oasis, a hearth, a nest where they can rest. But as long as they still have that they still have that sense of fear and security, they're always running. They may appear calm, but they will always have a back door. You may know such people. Unfortunately, we have many people like that today. I'm sure all of us have elements of it. That type of fear, insecurity. It may not be loud fear in the sense, oh, I'm terrified, I have nightmares. Some people have that as well. It may not be in the form of panic attacks, but it's definitely a force that's not coming necessarily from a healthy movement. It's coming from a place which is based on fear and running for your life, which can be an unbelievable impetus and catalyst for movement. But the movement itself is not necessarily one where you're looking for, like the soul flickering to transcend and find something deeper. That's one type of no menucha. That type of no menucha and lack of menucha and peace is the parameter of knowing that it's unhealthy is it's demoralizing. It weakens us. It drains and wears us down. Then there's the tzaddik's lack of menucha. The tzaddik's lack of menucha is exact opposite. It is a lack of peace that is empowering, strengthening, and a motivation for constant growth. It's not fighting demons. It's not fighting darkness. It's not wearing you down and draining you. It's tzaddik's constant search for the infinite journey called finding the essence. Being that yelcha mechayel chayel, going from strength to strength, the searches for the infinite, the searches for the divine, which has no end, the journey never stops. In our world, we live in a material world, a finite world, so there are stops and breaks. We have weekends, we have end of the year, we have holidays, we have projects, beginnings and ends, deadlines, which are man-made, superimposed elements that are necessary to keep a certain parameter. But the idea of a type of endless journey requires obviously an endless objective. The endless objective of finding God, finding the divine, is what a tzaddik aspires to. This doesn't mean, I should qualify, that it's a constant movement in the sense of constantly running or constantly traveling. There are stops and gaps and breaks, but they're all part of the forward movement. You find this right in the beginning of the book of Leviticus, Vayikra. Rashi brings and cites that when God taught Moses, the reason we have breaks in the Torah scroll, if you ever see a Torah scroll, you'll see it's not just a flowing text, but there are stops and breaks, that these hafsekim, these hafsakis, are breaks where God stopped and paused when he was teaching Moses Torah. As he was 40 days, 40 nights on Mount Sinai, he paused to allow Moses to absorb, to integrate. So those pauses are like the pauses where a teacher will share something with you, allow you to absorb it, allow you to reflect on it. Similar to when a person, let's say, eats. You don't just eat in one bite. You eat bite by bite, spoon-fed, and allow it to digest it until you take the next bite. When you move forward and you walk, sometimes you stop for a moment, or there's the short pauses between steps, all part of forward movement. That's not to be confused with someone who gets frozen or paralyzed in one place. I remember once at one of my classes, a funny thing happened. We had seltzer bottles on the table, and seltzer bottles, especially if somebody, let's put it this way, played around with the pressure within the bottle. So somebody opened up the seltzer bottle at his own peril, and instead of the seltzer ending up in the cup, it ended up all over his body. Being that it's seltzer, no stains, so he was drenched almost, I would say the entire bottle, but the bottle was all a lot of pressure, and he just opened it up and it was all over him. I'm sure it's happened to all of us at some point. Anyway, it was a great opportunity to give a class on that topic, which was the art of opening up a seltzer bottle. It reminds me of Zen and the art of motorcycle maintenance. And the basic lesson was this, that when you open a seltzer bottle, not knowing of course how much pressure, but assuming there's a lot of pressure built up, turn twice clockwise and once counterclockwise. Which means that make sure that you're constantly opening it, but always go back one step to release any additional pressure, so when it opens, it's not just comes bursting out, it'll be released by the time it's fully open. The lesson in life is very simple, my friends. It is, we all will face setbacks in our lives. We'll all encounter down time when we have to pause, when we have to reflect, when we may have made a mistake. And the key thing is that make sure that when you move forward, you always take 2 steps forward. So when you have 1 step back, 1 turn back one way, but 2 turns that way, you're making progress. Because that way, for every forward step, you're always making 1 step ahead. So 2 steps forward, 1 step back means 2 minus 1 means that you made 1 step forward. So every step forward keeps you going. If it was 1 step forward, 1 step back, you stay stuck in the same place. And we will all have both moments. We will have times when we're motivated and driven, forward thrust, and we'll have times where we relax or we don't feel as confident or reflecting or whatever it may be. So the key thing to remember is that by a tzaddik, who, as I said, is a seamless reflection, a transparent reflection of how life is meant to be lived, like a newborn child, there's constant movement. So he has no peace, but he's at peace with the fact that he has no peace, because it's a healthy form of no peace. A person who has no peace and is restless due to fear or insecurity, no, he should not be at peace with that. If he's at peace with that, that's a big problem. That's a resignation. That is fatalism. That's accepting your lot. A tzaddik knows, and a Talmid Chacham knows, that the journey is forever. Think of knowledge, since we mentioned Talmid Chacham, knowledge. A tzaddik is more of a righteous person in the sense that he's a righteous in actions. A Talmid Chacham is a scholar. Knowledge, is there an end to knowledge? Is there a thing that you can say, I've reached the pinnacle of knowing? Knowledge is an endless journey. Not just facts, not just accumulating more facts, of course that is endless, but it's also the expansion of the mind. On a qualitative level, it's endless. In the sense there's always more to learn. A mind that is advanced and developed and evolved wants to absorb even more. And ultimately, the great expression of Rav Yosef Albo in the book of Ikrim, Tachlis Hayediyah Shalei Neida. The ultimate of knowing is knowing that you don't know. Which sometimes is taken to mean that the more you know, the higher you climb on the mountain, the more you see how little you know. But also you can interpret as Tachlis Hayediyah Shalei Neida, the ultimate knowledge is knowing the unknowable. It's knowing not just that this journey continues forever, but there's fundamental unknowable things, and you know that it becomes integrated, it becomes personalized, and becomes something you can relate to, because it's part of the reality of your life, and so you're at peace with no peace. Your knowledge, you know that which is beyond knowledge, and that is ultimately the ultimate goal in a person's growth. Now, in this context, when we talk about this type of knowledge, this type of movement, this type of journey, clearly this journey is not one that is based on physical movement. It's the soul's journey. But now we have the problem. The problem is that as much as the soul wants to travel, as much as the soul wants to be moved by every experience, mind you, the flutter of a leaf. I should say the flutter of a butterfly, the blowing of a leaf, the wind, the sun, a particle in the air, in the whole infinity in the palm of your hand. The soul looks at everything with enchantment, because everything is alive. The soul is essentially alive, and it sees life in everything. Every fiber of existence, every cell is alive. And therefore it looks at everything in a constant moving way. It's a moving universe. It's a dynamic universe. But the soul has to contend with another voice. And that's the voice of our bodies. The voice that says, no. The voice that says that you are static. The body on its own, without the soul's perspective, is an inanimate couch potato. Psychologically, it likes to stay in one place. It's not interested in growth. And it struggles and battles with the soul and its movement. It battles in the sense it tries to convince us that no, take vacation, find ways to just slow down. It in some ways numbs and what's the word I want to use? And paralyzes the soul's constant need to breathe, constant need to move. And there's the battle going on between these two voices, these two forces, which that battle manifests in our lives. Now, especially when we have built vehicles and man-made flying machines, man-made technologies that allow us to travel very far quickly, both physically and in virtual reality, it just intensifies the body's argument that, hey, you know what? You don't need to move anywhere. You're moving. You're constantly on the move. When in fact, what's happening is the soul is asphyxiated. It doesn't feel that type of dynamic energy. It's like living in a golden cage, a gilded cage, where you have all the opportunities and you can move anywhere, but you're not really moving. So when a mother cradles a child, and she does not have the opportunity to travel anywhere, but there's a love being expressed between child and mother, and there's that type of, her heart is welled up with love, or tears of love, and the child connects in that way. There's more movement going on in that scene than in many of the great movers and shakers, whether it's on Wall Street or whether it's on vacation or on travel. As I said earlier, it doesn't need to be mutually exclusive, but sometimes one doesn't allow the other to emerge because there is a battle going on. You could say it's the battle between the movers and the battle between the paralyzers. I don't know if that's the way to phrase it, but that may be a bumper sticker that may work. In other words, the soul is a moving entity, and there's a body in the material world that is very lethargic and very frozen. And it doesn't have to be that way. Now, I'm not suggesting the body per se is a bad thing. A body also needs movement, exercise. For a body to be healthy, to breathe, circulation, it's a constant movement as well. But there's something about our personalities that becomes lazy and slothful, that turns us into what I call before couch potatoes. For example, you look at animals, they all move about exactly as much as they need to move. Their bodies, therefore, are not atrophied. There is a flexibility. Their muscles are flexed. They grow the way they should grow. Humans have the ability, with their minds or with their technologies, to travel places, and they themselves become almost soulless, empty, without that type of motivation to grow. So when we read about the chapter of journeys, it's about really discovering how to become a true traveler. So the first step, as always, is to recognize these two forces in your life. To recognize and not deceive yourself into thinking that you're a mover, that you're a traveler, when you're not. To acknowledge humbly that for a soul to travel requires a lot more than just buying tickets and clocking miles and traveling to every beautiful location on earth. Everyone should be able to travel, and I'm sure there's beautiful things in all these places, and they definitely stimulate, and they can teach you to grow and so on. But the key thing is, are you still in your comfort zone? And if you are, you have not grown. You have not moved. As a matter of fact, your travel then becomes also part of your comfort zone. You can then put it into your resume and say, hey, look, I've been here, I've been there. People have been in every part of the world. Beautiful. But if it's part of your comfort zone, then the soul has not really traveled. And the best test of it is, can you stay in your place and also travel without necessarily going there? If you must travel physically in order to move, it probably means that your soul does not know how to travel. If your soul knows how to travel, it can travel anywhere. Yes, it could also travel to an exotic place. So how do we feed that part of our soul? So interestingly, the 42 journeys was through a wilderness. If it was through beautiful countries, exotic locations, vacation spots, beachfront, beaches, beautiful beaches, turquoise, blue, green seas with white sand, you can say, well, okay, God wanted the Jewish people, after they are suffering for 210 years in a terrible exile, bondage, wanted to give them the gift, an opportunity, travel, see the beautiful sights of this world. Instead, the journeys of the Bible, of the Torah, are actually quite undramatic and very unglamorous. It's through a wilderness. You ever been in the Sinai wilderness? Not exactly a place you want to spend 40 years. Yes, you go on a tour. You go on tours to deserts today, but it's a tour that you come home in the evening, that you stock up with water and all kinds of supplies to make sure you don't succumb to the harsh realities of a true wilderness and desert. But to actually travel through a wilderness and stay there and not even know when and where you're going, not a simple matter. So it's interesting that the birth of the Jewish people comes, the cusp comes is born in a wilderness. After Egypt. And why doesn't God have a little compassion? He let them suffer so many years in a beautiful country called Egypt, but they happened to be not in a beautiful situation. They were in slavery, only to take them out to another wilderness, another harsh reality called the desert. And that's where the 42 journeys take place. And that's where the Baal Shem Tov says we all go through those 42 journeys. Why wilderness? Bamidbar. This is the book of Bamidbar that we're concluding. Maseh is the 42 journeys in the wilderness. The first journeys were not as bad because they were closer to civilization, but as they continued on, subsequently it got harsher and harsher. Because it comes to teach us that journey is not just about being pleasant, it's about getting out of the comfort zone. It's about growing. And sometimes we need to recognize that through the antithesis of being in a place that's parched, difficult, and not easy. And here's a concept that is a most powerful concept that many of you may have heard of. The concept of Yeridus HaNeshama B'Guf. The journey, perhaps the beginning of all journeys, the mother of all journeys, of a soul's descent to this earth. So there's an interesting debate between Shammai and Hillel, the two classic sages that argue about many different matters, especially their students, Beis Shammai, the house of Shammai, and the house of Hillel. And the argument is it more pleasant for a person to be born or not to be born? So Shammai says it's more pleasant not to be born. Nuach la'adam shalei nivra mishenivra. It's more pleasant not to be born than to be born. Or more pleasant not to be created than to be created. Hillel says, Nuach la'adam shal nivra mishalei nivra. It's more pleasant for a person to be created than not to be created. And interestingly, even though usually the ruling is according to Hillel, who is usually the more lenient one, in this case, the ruling is according to Shammai. And what is the ruling? The ruling is that it's more pleasant not to be born. So the Alter Rebbe, Likutei Torah, asked the question, what does that mean? So he answers, Nuach, the word is Nuach, pleasant. It's definitely more pleasant to live in the spiritual heights of a transcendent world where there are no concerns about health and financial worries and anxieties, emotional, psychological abuse, cruelty, selfishness, so on and so forth. Of course it's more pleasant, but it's more meaningful to be born than not to be born. more meaningful to be created than not to be created. So the word pleasant, Shammai, is correct. It's not. This world is not a pleasant world. We all have faced difficulties. But more meaningful is this journey. Because as long as the soul remains in its spiritual habitat, it is in its comfort zone. So interestingly, comfort zone here is being used in a positive way. It's in its own spiritual habitat, but it's its own comfort zone, so it never is motivated to get out of its own natural state of being, its own natural personality. So we find this context, this theme throughout Kabbalistic and Hasidic writings, where it all talks about the need to force the soul, yes, to coerce the soul, al korcha chatachai, to leave its comfortable habitat and enter this world, and all because getting out of the comfort zone of the soul's comfort zone, allows it to thrive, to flourish, and achieve things it could never achieve in its own nest. So soul doesn't want to go, has to be commanded, has to be coerced, with telling the soul as well, one of the incentives is that you'll reach places you can never reach on your own. Using the example of Zayis, an olive does not produce oil until you press it. So getting out of a comfort zone means the pressure and all the challenges that force you to have to excel, force you to have to rise to the occasion and be the best you can be. Like a tea bag. You don't know how strong a person is until you put them into hot water. This world is a world of hot water. All the paths are dangerous. We don't know what tomorrow brings, but we know we have the strength to overcome any challenge. So it's interesting that it says Mahalchim beina oimdim. About the soul, it says that the soul are travelers among those that are standers. So think of a traveler, one traveler around many Mahalchim, many travelers around, surrounded by those that stand. And the Hasidic texts explain oimdim refer to the angels, or sometimes to the souls as they are in heaven, in the spiritual habitat. And Mahalchim, the ones standing in one place, are spiritual entities, but they're staying in one space. Even if they move a bit, they move in their own orbit. Whereas the soul, as it comes down to earth, is Mahalchim. It has the power to become a traveler, because it's going out of its comfort zone, and therefore being elevated and motivated to new places that are outside of its trajectory, outside of its natural path. So here's an interesting thing. We're not just talking about movement as versus standing in one place, movement versus being stationary. We're talking about movement versus movement in your own path, or trodden path, and movement into new areas. Abraham had moved before he went Lech Lecha, but Lech Lecha ma'atzach ma'aladadcha beis avicha, to get out of his comfort zone, that he did not do. Or at least not to that extent. So a person can move, but they're still moving in their path. You know, we all move, we have our orbit, we have our comfort zone, we have our friends, and there's movement. But it's a movement that's not challenging you to get out of your own natural habits and routines. And just to give a few examples, Rab Zera was a great scholar. He had mastered the Talmud, the Babylonian Talmud. And then the Talmud tells us that at some point in midlife, he decided to fast 100 fasts in order to forget the Babylonian Talmud, so he can go ahead and study the Jerusalem Talmud. So the question is asked, since when do you have to forget knowledge to accumulate knowledge? Knowledge is accumulative. Whatever you knew yesterday helps you get to the next stage. The second question is, as a matter of fact, it's forbidden to intentionally and deliberately forget Torah, God's Torah. And the answer given, a beautiful answer, is he wasn't interested in forgetting what he had learned. He was interested in the methodology, the comfort zone. He had learned to think a certain way. Today, psychologists tell us by age 7 and 8, we already have developed our way of thinking. We haven't accumulated all our knowledge, we've not yet evolved, but the way we will think, the way we will solve problems, and each one people have different ways, has already been established based on parents, on genetics, and so on. Education, people who have helped shape us in our formative years. Rabbi Zera, a great scholar, imagine it, who had mastered an art. No, you've already mastered a way of solving problems. Why look to solve a new one? Because he was a true humble seeker. Ein lehem menucha, he was not at peace. He was at peace with the fact that he was not at peace. So he wanted to move a new way of understanding things. Talmud, Jerusalem Talmud's methodology is a different type than the Babylon. Babylonia works things through questions, through counter questions, through arguments. Through darkness you come to light. Talmud Yerushalmi is called Or Yashar. You come to light immediately. It's like a way of looking at, trying to find the conclusion initially and then going and explaining it. The Talmud Bavli, you don't know where you're at, you're confused. And from darkness, Shivani is where I said where I am, and from there you emerge and you try to find light. He wanted to find that new approach. These are real seekers. These are real movers. They're not satisfied, even with healthy habits. A second example in Tanya, chapter 15, he talks about the difference between serving God and not serving God. So you think the differences of serving God is pretty obvious. Someone serves God, someone dedicated and does what God wants them to do. And not serving is someone who is interested in their self-interest. They're self-centered instead of God-centered. No, the Talmud says something interesting, and the Tanya elaborates. What does it say? That a person, in those days in the Talmud, there was a custom to study and review your studies 100 times. 100 times they would review a Talmudic passage or other things they learned. It says, a person who reviews their studies 100 times is considered loy avodai, someone who has not served God. That's interesting, huh? Who is an Oved Elokim, a servant of God? Someone who studies 101 times. That one time, as he explains in that chapter 15 in Tanya, that one extra time tips the scale of a stationary person to a mover and shaker. Why? Because he's gone out of his routine. 100 times studying something. We're talking about a good habit. We're not talking about doing something wrong, but it's your habit, it's your routine, it's not your comfort zone. So there's a lack of movement. Real movement is qualitative. It's not just that you studied one more time, it's that one qualitative time that you went out of your routine. That turns him into a servant of God. So you see, the standard here isn't about just going from bad to good, it's from good to excellent, from good to great. And greatness comes only when you're out of your comfort zone. That's what the 42 journeys were necessary to go through a wilderness. Had God taken them through beautiful countries, as much as they may have deserved it, it would not have taught them the secret of life. You need to be challenged. Movement is not about physically going to places. It's about spiritually going to places, to new places. And that's why it's not contingent on how many miles you travel. It's being able to see the extraordinary within the ordinary. You don't need to go to an extraordinary site. Now that doesn't mean you shouldn't go or can't go, but don't think that's the secret, that some outer extraordinary sight or scene or experience is going to fill your heart and soul and move you. Because if you can move, you'll see the extraordinary even in the ordinary. Even in the smallest little things, you'll see extraordinary power. So are you a traveler or not? Ask yourself the question. You could say, has my body traveled many places? Surely. But your soul, where is it traveling? How far does it travel? Does it know how to travel? Does it have the courage to travel? That's the message of this week's chapter. And we can develop such courage by knowing that we have inside of us that child that continues to be enchanted by everything. If you don't allow yourself to get trapped by the bitterness, by the customs and routines that have hardened you, go back to that place and look at things. Open your eyes and just see the splendor of life. You meet a new person. Don't look at the externals that may disturb you. Look at what's new about this person. What can I learn from this person? You travel to a new place. Don't just say, oh, it was not as good as I expected it to be. You go to a restaurant. Find the extraordinary even in the things that may not be so special on the external level. It'll force you to go into your soul It'll force you to get out of your comfort zone. So the soul comes down to this earth because this is a place that's not comfortable. Precisely for that reason, the soul can travel to great places. One of the analogies given sometimes about this movement, these two types of movement I'm discussing, is like a chessboard. All the pieces on the chessboard, besides the pawn and the queen, can only travel in their own trajectory. You have the bishop, you have the rook, you have the knight. So the bishop travels diagonally, the knight travels 2-1, the rook travels vertically and horizontally. A pawn, a simple pawn, can only travel one step at a time, except its first move 2 steps. But when it comes to the other side of the board, it turns into a queen, and a queen can travel all directions. The pawn is an example of a soul coming down to this earth. Initially, it may not seem to have as much power and movement as the other pieces. Who moves better than the queen does? Who moves better than a bishop, or, of course, a rook, and then a bishop or a knight, depending how you measure it. The king is another story. The king is the one that needs to be protected. King can move in all directions, but only one step at a time. The pawn can turn into a queen. True movement lies in the domain of those that may seem simple and humble, serve on the front line like the pawns, like the foot soldiers, that go only one step at a time. But when they conquer, they reach the other end. They vanquish the enemy, meaning they reach the other end of the enemy line. They become queens. Their movement is far greater than the angels, which are the rooks, the bishops, and the knights. So the chessboard can be an analogy also for this type of movement. And you'll see this throughout life. The excellence, greatness, you can be born with. You can be born with being good, even being great. But excellence is achieved through hard work. Even the most talented people, writers, artists, athletes, business people, will tell you that there's as much as you have natural talent, it's the hard work, it's the exertion, it's overcoming challenges. It's exactly what we hate most, the tension, the anxiety, healthy anxiety, the not being at peace of the tzaddik, but as soon as you're at peace with it, that's what achieves excellence. So basically, you'll find several types of people. You'll find people who move, let's maybe say 4 types of people. There's a person who's lethargic on all levels. Their bodies don't move, their souls don't move. They're just trapped in their own little cocoons or basements. Then you have people who physically move about, but their heart has not budged an inch for years and years. Then you have people who have both, obviously. And then you have people who have movement, but the movement is not out of their comfort zone. It's movement, but it's still within their world. So for a person to truly achieve being a traveler, requires being able to also not just move, but also to travel out of your comfort zone. And embracing that, having the courage, the strength, the security to go to insecure places. That's what a secure person knows how to do. To go to a place that is not so pleasant. It's more pleasant not to be born than to be born. But they go to an unpleasant place and they turn it into a pleasant place. That is the ultimate traveler. And that's why tzaddikim, Talmidei Chacham, great people, and all of us, Amach Kulam tzaddikim, all of us have the potential within us to achieve that. To go to a place that may initially seem like it's not a place where you want to be, but that's the place where you can excel. And that excellence creates true movement. It creates the tension, the tension and resolution that is so much part of the ebb and flow of life. Tension and resolution, rotzeh and shuv, of the heartbeat, rotzeh and shuv, of the breath, neshama, neshima, which is also the tension and resolution, and the pulse of the soul, neshama. A constant movement. It sees greater heights, wants to transcend, has to then resolve and integrate it, only to grow further. And it's a constant flow. And you're at peace with this lack of being at peace. So on practical level, the first thing is to assess yourself. To look at yourself. Every one of us have moments where our souls are moved. You listen to a song. You sometimes even see a scene. But the key is not to escape in a film or in a book. It's to take it back to you in real world. Can you look at a human being, not at a movie or read a book, and be moved by that person? That forces you to go into your soul, which forces you to go into the other person's soul. That's called the empathy that is developed through being able to get beyond our comfort zone. You see, we live in a comfortable world. It's easy, and it's relatively lack of challenges. And the challenges we do have, unfortunately, as I said earlier, the people that move, not in a healthy way. I should have added that as one of the categories. People who move out of fear, out of insecurity, they're running all over the place. And sometimes that creates the illusion of movement. I know some of the most creative people, some people who have achieved great things, but it came out of a lot of pain. They say many artists, it's about pain. It's about existential loneliness. It's about losing something that creates sometimes excellent creative juices begin to flow. I am suggesting we don't need to wait for pain. We don't need to run in an unhealthy way to run in a healthy way. You can motivate yourself by looking at the world and saying, I was sent here on this earth on a mission, on a journey. You're a traveler. We are soul travelers. And we are frequent flyers, spiritual frequent flyers, which means our soul came down to this earth on a journey. It will go through many journeys in our lives, as I said, 42, but even more when you break it down. Each journey will have its challenges. A journey by definition means you're going to a place where you were not there before, because if not, it's not really a journey. You're just returning to your own orbit. And when you go on this journey, you'll have two options. You'll either retreat in fear, or you'll embrace it. You'll celebrate the journey. You'll celebrate being at peace with not being at peace. You'll celebrate that this movement will bring your soul to new places, give it new opportunities, allow the soul to emerge and actualize itself in ways that it could never have done had it stayed in its own place. And you will learn to embrace not only the comfortable, but also the uncomfortable. Going to a room and you see strangers. Do you gravitate to the strangers, or do you gravitate to those that you know? So the natural part of us gravitates usually to the ones that we know, to the people we recognize. But the soul is eager to meet that which is unknown, and it has the confidence to do so. So this is a case-by-case approach that each of us has to figure out where we stand, but we have to know that our souls are waiting to be released. They're eager, they're enthusiastic to take on the challenge. And we can truly be true movers, we can be true travelers if we allow ourselves to be that way. True travelers by embracing the challenges of our lives and seeing how they can become opportunities. I speak on a personal note. I travel, I've met many different people. Maybe this is part of my personality, maybe part of my training, but I really am excited to meet a new person. There's always new potential. You always see the dignity of another journey. You always see something unique. And I really am excited to be able to engage and see how we each can help actualize one another. And not necessarily with strings attached. It doesn't always have to do with a business deal. It's about understanding the beauty, the magic of our intersecting, of our interacting, of the synergy and harmony that comes through the tapestry of so many different individuals. Every one of us has our sphere of influence, has our friends. There's time to start looking at it all in a new way, and that makes you a journeyer. Even though it's easier to meet a new person and say that's a journey, you know something? In even the people you know, you can find new things. After years of getting accustomed to soul, maybe it's time to sit down and say, hey, the soul's potential is unlimited. God is unlimited. Let me see what this person is capable of. Now we need to balance the two. Sometimes we need a rejuvenated energy by going into an area that's completely unknown, but sometimes we have to bring it back to things that are comfortable and make that uncomfortable. Make your comfort zone an uncomfortable place. Let's put it that way. Or, as some say about me, and I'm sure about others, you make happy people miserable and miserable people happy. Let's clarify that. I don't mean happy people miserable in the bad way. I mean happy people to be a little more insightful, thoughtful, introspective, not so comfortable with themselves. always good to have a certain element of serenity, but not too much. A little angst, a little searching, a little yearning for something more. So, in this week of journeys, as we conclude the fourth book of the Torah about traveling, and each of us, it teaches us, it behooves us to think of ourselves as travelers. Each of us are movers and shakers. We've been sent to this world, a foreign world, an alien environment, for the soul to excel. Think about that. When you wake up in the morning, Moda Ani, you say, you acknowledge, my soul has just returned to me. It's just been returned to you from a more spiritual environment. The Medrash says that during sleep, the soul gets rejuvenated in the well springs and refreshed in the waters of the divine, only to begin another day, a fresh day, taking on new challenges, taking on carpe diem, seize the day, taking on the new opportunities. And each day has that type of refreshing element that begins anew. Don't think of the day just, another day in the week that has been going on forever and ever. The more things change, the more they stay the same. That's the voice of the lethargy, the lethargic voice, the stationary voice. And then there's the voice of embracing, of celebrating the new, looking for the new within the old, seeing the original, even the things that seemingly have been with us for so long. And then, of course, embracing and taking on challenges that are original and actually new. And this is something each of us can reach. Each of us are capable of. It's just a matter of applying yourself. And, of course, as I always say, one of the greatest pieces of advice is to be around other travelers. Journeyers, the journeyer in you, the journeyman or journeywoman in you, the journey person in you, will emerge when you're with other travelers. That's how it is. It's like going on a group tour, on a group journey. It makes it easier, because when others are on, they say about when others fly, it helps you fly. They say that the formation of geese when they fly in that V pattern is perfect for the geese to ride on the what is the word used, the air pockets created by the geese before them. So the V pattern helps them all fly with each other. So sometimes in this world where things can be difficult, it's good to fly with another. It's good to be able to engage in that particular way. So, yes, William Blake said it well, to see infinity in the palm of your hand. I forget already the whole poem, but basically the grain of sand and the palm of your hand, and to be able to find eternity in an hour. It's the ability to be able to look into the eyes of your beloved, and without moving even, being able to travel places that no one has ever traveled before. There's no question that we are capable of that. Love does that. The same is with other experiences where you can reach the heavens and beyond from where you are right now. And then, of course, physical travel will only enhance that experience. And that's really what it comes down to. You can sit on a park bench right now, right near your home, without paying a penny to go anywhere, without flying on a plane or on a boat or on a car, and just look at the air, look at the birds, look at the sky. You look closely with a little patience. Don't get caught up with all the technologies that keep us so-called connected, but really numb us from seeing life and the vitality around us. That is traveling. And when you train yourself to do this every day, I would suggest every morning, anytime, it could be in the evening, take 5-10 minutes, learn to travel, learn to stay in one place, sit in one place. It could be through prayer, it could be through study, it could be through meditation, it could be through hearing a song. I would suggest the less stimulation from outside, the better. Try to stimulate yourself. So not even a song. You want to sing, but without someone else singing for you or without playing music. Try to stimulate from within the journey. Try to move without anything else moving you. In other words, no vehicles, no crutches, no tools, no wings of others. Develop your own wings. You'll be surprised. Dedicate 5 to 10 minutes a day to this. You'll start seeing, number one, you'll build confidence that you're capable. Number two, you'll want to do more of it. Number three, you'll be able to then go into the world where there are vehicles and learn how they do not necessarily replace your ability to travel and to fly. So keep clocking in, keep accumulating and amassing those frequent flyer miles to get you more tickets. But don't obsess and don't get consumed with that. Try to find the real frequent flyer miles, which are the souls. And that you can accumulate without necessarily paying tickets. You can basically accumulate them by simply concentrating, simply dedicating time to doing what I've just suggested. And another exercise would be with our own children, people we love, the same thing. Don't use a third element that stimulates you. By all means, you want to go to dinner, go to see a movie and other things, that's your prerogative. But also designate time where nothing else but you and that other person. Look at each other, have a conversation, stimulate each other without tools, without man-made tools, without outside influences, outside third parties, so to speak. And you'll discover new dimensions of your own soul. These are ways how we learn to travel. Once upon a time in a world where there wasn't so much technology, it was easier because there was nothing else but that type of stimulation. Sometimes I drive in New York on Ocean Parkway or even Eastern Parkway, and I see people just sitting playing chess or playing checkers or dominoes. The evening, it looks like they look forward to it, and others watching it. There's something very beautiful about this. So it's true, there is some stimulation, they're playing the game, but there's human interaction. And sometimes it's a hot night. But there's a certain element of human interaction that is necessary for this travel. Now, there are many, many ways to do this, and I think it's critical for us to look at it that way. And I just want to qualify, I don't mean just escaping to a beach or looking at a sunset, which is all beautiful, and allowing the sunset to do the job for you. Create a sunset within your own soul. Don't have anything. Just you and the other person, or just you and yourself. You have the sunset within you. You have the sunrise. You have the moon. You have the flowers. You have the birds. You have the music. You have God. You have everything you need to be able to create that journey. And try that out, and you'll learn to build confidence in your own self. I can travel. I don't need anything to travel. This is not meant to be an exercise in arrogance or in self-containment or self-reliance. It's an exercise in self-confidence. To know that you do not need machines and technology and gadgets and gimmicks to help you travel. You have an infinite recess into your soul that you can travel more and more and more and more endlessly. Your soul has everything you need. The rest of the world is a stage. It's a place where the soul was sent to challenge us, to bring out that strength from within. Not to replace it. Not to seduce us. Not to distract us and other types of stimulations. So you have right now, where you're sitting, where you're standing, wherever you are right now, you have that soul, which is literally an infinite journey in itself. It's a place that you can reach the deepest places of what we call the Ein Sof, the infinite, because it is part of a piece of the divine. So coupled with our physical experiences and that soulful inner place, you can fly and reach heaven and beyond. So on a concluding note, I would like to again say that this class is dedicated to the journey of a special soul, Sedel Tova, whose birthday it is today. And thank you to Goldie and Ari and Dov for dedicating this class. May all our journeys be with souls within bodies, and that we are able to discover new dimensions, new horizons, unprecedented heights. And I have no doubt that each of us is capable of doing so. And please see me as a resource, as a friend. As I said with the geese, humans too, our wings can help each other, propel each other, help carry us, especially sometimes when you need a little more support. Have others that support you, and you in turn will support them when they need when they need a little more additional incentive and help. And maybe all together create a meaningful life. And I'd like to also say this occasion that next week I will be giving this class, both online and on location. And it's an honor to be speaking to you, honor to be part of your journey. And thank you for allowing me into your life, to your time, into your sacred space, wherever you may be in the world. Today's technology, right here, sitting in one space, I was able to travel and journey thousands and thousands of miles into the living rooms, to the dining rooms, into the bubble baths, as I always like to point out, into the comfort zones maybe of any one of you listening to this. And hopefully the journey is a mutual one where I've traveled to you, and hopefully that creates some movement in the sense of moving you, and hopefully also receive movement from you as well. I always find that it's a very moving, powerful experience for me to be in contact and allowing, having been welcomed and allowed into so many people's lives. It's really changed my life for the better, and continues to help motivate me to grow and to move, and I wish to do so together with you for many, many years. So please be in touch with us. If we don't have your email address, please send it to us at meaningfullife.com is our website. And the email address, you can subscribe right there, or you can send us an email to wisdomreb@meaningfullife.com. And again, it's an honor to speak to you. May your journeys go well and peacefully, but also being at peace with the fact that there's not always peace, in a good way, in a healthy way. And may our journeys be ones that we're not running from darkness, from demons, but a journey into light and into more light, into infinite light. And may the journey be one that is gratifying, synergetic, and all of us creating a large movement, composition, cosmic movement and composition, each of us with our indispensable musical note. Thank you very much, everyone, and have a very good week. And I look forward to speak to you again next week. Be well. Bye-bye.